G'day, my name's Warbles On A Lot, at least that's what it is on YouTube, and as you can see I live on the very outside edge of a society that are totally functionally psychotic by all of their own measuring criteria. They actually light fires to make their food become cold. Okay, I do burn some things, I do emit some carbon, but at least when I light a fire I'm only lighting a fire because I want something to get hot. Alright, I'm not psychotic, I'm just a little bit neurotic. And being neurotic, it means that I worry about stuff that other people don't give a shit about. Now there's a friend of mine, an acquaintance, you know, over the internet, called AdamShumpisxXx. And he's got the theory that one of these days somebody's going to say something or do something or threaten something, or he's going to be scared that they're going to threaten something, which will entitle him to throw a temper tantrum. And he wants to know when it's acceptable to take up violence, to throw that savage a temper tantrum. Well, I'm going to try and explain a little bit of a story about last time I had a genuine fair dinkum murderous home invader and what happened. Okay? Once upon a time I annoyed a particular person. I sent that person a text message in which I called him a, quote, murderous twit, unquote. That particular insult, statement of mine, pushed a particular button inside his head, and it took him a fortnight to work himself up to a particular passion of murderous rage, and he came to visit me. These are the doors of my humble abode, and before he confronted these doors, the home invader, he had spent 2 hours creeping and crawling around my clearing. First, he parked his car at the bottom of my driveway at the upside down tree, and then at sunrise he slunk his way up the hill, and while he was doing that I was asleep at the top of the hill. And then eventually I got up and lit my fire and sat in my little chair in front of the fire, and I listened to the radio, completely oblivious to the fact that my endangered species sanctuary was being invaded by somebody who'd already worked themselves up into a murderous rage. Not much fun, but you know, that's the situation in real life. 15 kilometres from town, 1.5 kilometres from the nearest neighbour. So, it was me versus the aggressor, with the God theory watching from on top. Now I don't know whether he came in through my side fence or my front gate, or whether he came in through my front fence, the boundary onto the sheep farm. I do know that when he crossed the boundary coming onto the endangered species sanctuary, the aggressive murderous home invader was carrying a dead red-belly black snake in a plastic bag. And I know this 2 days after the home invasion, over on the other side of the clearing, masked from sight by the aeroplane trailer, inside this pile of disused tyres, down in here I found a plastic bag with a dead red-belly black snake, which old mate, the home invader, had prepositioned so that it could stink up my life long after he had left. So here we have him, sitting on my front veranda at about 8:05 in the morning, listening to the radio coming out of the hut as I'm inside, where I was quietly, peacefully sitting like any little hermit should in their hovel, with the miniature pot belly keeping the hut warm and the radio filling my ears with ABC Radio National, so there was no possible way I could actually perceive the lurkings of the interloper. So, it was completely by synchronicity, or the organisational powers of the cosmic scoreboard effect, or karma, or the creator of the universe, depending on your God theory, that placed my hands onto these two knobs exactly and precisely as the interloper was on the outside of the doors, with his hands on the knobs, ready to throw them apart. Therefore, thus and because, as the doors were flung apart, and my hands went with them, the right-hand door has since been locked, so I can't show you the movement, but this doorknob threw my hand directly across onto the kitchen table where the knives are. So, we have a Kelvinator meat knife. We have an absolutely perfect fighting knife. And my hand was thrown directly onto the knife handles as the door was opened. And what did I face? As I stood there in shock, he ran across and he ripped the handset out of my landline and demanded to know where the mobile phone was. It was on the bedside table, but he hadn't seen it. His pupils were fully dilated, he was in a killing rage, and he wasn't noticing small details. I ran past him, grabbed the mobile phone, jumped outside halfway between the hut and the toilet, and started to try and dial 000. He came and crash tackled me, and we struggled. The struggle moved onto the veranda, around the corner, and over to here, where the mobile phone moved down into here, and I lost it. I thought it had gone underneath the decking. He told me later that his big plan was to cripple my communications, prevent me from being able to call the police, and after that he wanted to have his little chat with me. So while he was scrabbling after the mobile phone, I ran inside, where I grabbed a hold of a walking stick that I personally carved out of iron wood, and I had grafted a piece of leopard wood into the centre of it with a piece of iron bark at the bottom end of it. And as he came at me, I swung this at his head, and I was actually planning on breaking his skull. Problem is, he'd got rid of one of my phones, he'd also made the other one disappear, and my nearest neighbour is a mile away. And I knew that if I fractured his skull with the walking stick, by the time I ran to the neighbours and called for an ambulance, he might be dead from an extradural hematoma. And I couldn't explain that to the police, just like I couldn't explain it to the magistrate if I had stabbed him as he tried to come in the door. So that was the second time I decided not to try and kill the home invader. And I pulled the punch, as it said. I didn't try to kill him with a stick. I tried to break his leg instead. And what happened was the stick hit the rock under his foot, the piece of leopard wood shattered into a heap of pieces, and I was left with a two-pronged, T-handled stabbing stick. And I seriously thought about driving it up under his chin, but I figured even if I went through his larynx and stopped him from breathing, it wasn't going to stop him from wriggling around and being cranky with me. So I figured, if I jab him in the throat with the end of the walking stick, I'm then going to have to cave his skull in with a shit pot stirring stick. Now, as you can see, I've never quite got around to repairing the walking stick because I get too cranky just thinking about it. But the shit pot stirring stick, that lives over here. And it's a piece of 3x2, which has a turned handle on one end, and the other end is fairly well impregnated with Escherichia coliforms, which is the bacteria that live in human turds. That's because I use this stirring stick when it comes time to empty my toilet bucket. It's an interesting system. Here we have a dipper and a bucket of ashes out of the fire. That's fairly alkaline. Over here we have a 20 litre nappy bucket underneath a fly-proof toilet container. So when that nappy bucket gets to be full, it gets probably 3 litres or so of water added, it gets stirred into a slurry and it gets poured down rabbit burrows. Because yes, I employ biological warfare against the noxious feral pest. I shit down their burrows. But it meant that if I used this bit of wood to cave in the head of the home invader, after I used my T-handled, 2-pronged ironwood stabbing stick to impale him by the larynx, then he was going to have E. coli mixed in the middle of his brain tissue and he wasn't going to survive, and I couldn't explain that to the magistrate. Let's face it, 2 oddballs who live on the outside edge of society arguing with each other, and one of them goes to the other one's place and one of them gets killed. There's no possible way I could justify killing in self-defence for somebody breaking 2 doors on a lawn locker and tearing a telephone out by its cord. So, in a flash of inspiration, I realised I couldn't explain it to the God theory either, and because I had held myself back on 3 occasions from killing him, I just told him, that's it, if you want to kill me, you can explain it to the God theory and you can explain it to the magistrate, I'm not going to hit you back. That's it, I quit fighting. I couldn't bring myself to kill him, so I stopped. He hit me once in the face, he shouted at me for a while, and then he spent the afternoon soldering my telephone back together. Because, as I explained, ABC Radio in regional New South Wales had an appointment to ring me up 5 hours after he'd first broken the phone, so that I could go live to air explaining why it's a bad idea to hit children. And after he fixed my phone up, he left, and he's never been back, and that was 2 years ago. So that's what happens in real life when you, on your own, with no help possible, are confronted with a home invader. If you decide to be non-resistant, the God theory will sort it out. If you're at your spiritual peak and you can't learn anything more, well, maybe you will get killed. Maybe. But at least you won't be the one who's done the evil. And as Socrates said, it is better to suffer evil than to commit evil. And my home was being invaded. My home is my castle. It may be humble, but it's all I've got. And I had a chance to kill him, and I chose not to. And therefore, I'm not in jail and he's not dead. He's not in jail and I'm not dead. Best possible solution is to be non-resistant. Now the thing is, you've got to remember that the only reason he ripped the doors off was because I said I wouldn't talk to him. If I had have said, yes, come on inside and have a cup of coffee, none of that shit fight would have happened. Okay, that's part 1. You need to get your head around that. Be non-resistant. It is better to be non-resistant. If I hadn't have resisted, the fight would never have occurred. Now the other thing is, I've known since I was 3 years old that I was able to do more damage than I was able to fix. Because that was when I first put a hoe into a 2-year-old baby's head. I stuck it in there so hard when I was 3 that the handle stayed parallel to the ground when he fell over. I can still remember the noise it made when I put my foot on the back of his neck and I pulled the blade out of his skull. And ever since then I've been scared of how much damage I could do to other people on account of me being an angry individual. It is better to be non-resistant. Thou shalt not kill. That's what the commandment says, and I get bloody sick of people who've never done it philosophising about how righteous it is to kill people and defend yourself. So you think about that, AdamShumpisxXx. My real life has more validity than your imagination. Because we all live on one planet, dude. Be selfless.